Hello. It's good to see you all today. Welcome back to those of you who've joined me before. And hi to you, to those of you who are catching this on replay. I am Dr. Julie Alleg, AKA the Data Diva. And I want to say thank you for joining me today on this lovely, hot Friday afternoon, at least here in New England on September 8th, which is when I'm streaming this. It's hot. It's hot. Nice and cool here in my office. So thank goodness for that. Just a reminder, you can catch me every Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, over on LinkedIn or over on my YouTube channel. It's great to see you. Let's see. If you are joining us from wherever in the world, go ahead and insert in the comments where you are joining us from. I always love to see which of the members of my community are able to catch me. So today, I wanted to talk about a case study. And I talked about Business Insights, a case study in black and white. And that was just a little bit tongue in cheek because if you know anything about me, you know how much I love colors. So actually, the charts and graphs and all that I have for today are pretty colorful. But in black and white, what I meant to be alluding to there is that black and white, in other words, looking at your numbers, looking at a case study and getting some insights from the black and white portion of your business, of the numbers. So, why am I doing this today? Because every time I talk about how I was able to really dig into the data, how it's a gold mine. You probably heard me say that before. It's just a treasure trove. I get either a puzzled look, like, how can my business numbers be a treasure trove or a gold mine? Or the person's eyes just glaze over. And I wanted to show you by walking through a case study, a hypothetical case study. I should make that clear. What exactly I mean by that, because if you're not in data every day, like I am, just normal course of business, you might not quite understand. And I think also I wanted to illustrate how you don't need to have a doctorate like I do to start getting insights and start seeing more and start learning more about what your business, what's really happening in your business, what trends are happening. You can do it yourself. And also the charts and all that I'm going to show, the visualizations, I did them in Tableau. Just that's my weapon of choice. Could have done them in Power BI, could have done them in something else, but these also you could just as easily do in Microsoft Excel. And I say that also because I wanted to emphasize that you don't necessarily need specialized visualization software to be able to do this. If what you have at your disposal is Excel, you are good to go. I'm going to show you a few ways that you can do this. And I'll show you what I mean by unpacking a business's data and helping to really start using data to drive those decisions. All right. So, Jules, let's get going, right? Okay. So, let me go ahead and share my other screen. And we'll get going. Okay. Yep. Let's hide that because we don't need to see it. And here is the slideshow. All right. So, what are we looking at here? All right. So, this hypothetical is 1 year's worth of data from a local organic coffee shop that opens early in the morning, and they also offer some food items. So they've got lots of coffee, they've got the iced, they've got the espressos, those sorts of variations on coffee. Plus, they have breakfast items, and then they also serve lunch. They also are open on the weekends, and so they also have brunch items on the menu. First thing I would do is to make a bar graph. Remember, if you're pressed for time, if you want to just get going and start taking a stab at what your data is doing, the three types of visuals that the human brain perceives most accurately are bar graphs, line charts, scatter plot. So here, what I did is I just tallied up the number of customers that this hypothetical restaurant had in each month. So over the course of 2019. And here you can see that I have a couple of red circles on here. Those are the months that I wanted to call attention to. We've got March and then August are the highest. So we had the greatest number of customers. But then we've got December, January, February, definitely the lowest. So right off the bat, I wanted to point out to the audience and also remind myself for the times that I'm going back through this and reviewing things, wanted to level set. So just with one graph, one picture, already you're able to see numbers that in 2019, this business did not break 2,000 customers a month, but it was getting close. And then the big months were March and August. Actually, yeah. And that the winter were definitely a lot lower. And this business is in New England. And so the winter, not so surprising that it might have fewer patrons back in 2019. So keep in mind, this is also pre COVID. So it would have been with a lot less options for ordering, for DoorDash sort of thing, Grubhub sort of thing. This would have been actually dependent on physically visiting the location. So this is good for level setting. So again, bar chart already starting to tell you the story right there. And of course, it's not working. There we go. Yep. Next one. Okay. Then, still looking at the customers, let's see, instead of looking at how many customers we had in each month in the year, let's look at customers by day of the week. Now, this business was open 7 days a week. And what I wanted to start trying to see is, again, if there were any patterns. So when I'm looking at things like this, and when you can be looking at your business's numbers, the first place to start is what are the highest, what are the lowest? And then is that surprising? Does that surprise me? That's the sort of thing. So here we've got the highest on Friday and Saturday, so more or less the weekend, and the lowest on Monday. So putting two together so far, what we're looking at is simply the number of customers. We've looked at it in a couple of ways by time, right? So a temporal aspect. We've looked at it by month. We've looked at it by day of the week. And we're starting to see things unfold, right? For this business, Fridays and Saturdays, they've got their most customers. Mondays are dead. Look at though, Tuesdays almost up there with the largest days. So, one question I've got is how can we make Monday look like Tuesday? Something like that. These are the things that are starting to run around in my head as I start analyzing this, right? Then, what I did with this hypothetical was I looked at the customers, and so far, what we've done is just look at customers as one big group, right? But there are different kinds of customers. So I wanted to start figuring out how to break that overall aggregate idea of customers into smaller subgroups. So what I did was I ran a frequency and histogram. So basically, what I did is look to see where more or less the natural cut points were by the number of visits that these customers did. So now what I'm doing is looking at customer frequency. And customer frequency is one of the things that in my analyses that I do, I start to look at that, especially when I am interested in questions about customer retention. And it's very interesting to me to be when my clients have questions about retention. We're bringing in tons of new customers every month, but our total number of customers has plateaued. It's not growing. It's because you're bringing in new ones, but you're losing ones that you brought in last month or 2 months ago. So it's basically almost a wash, right? You bring in as many as you lose. That's not good. That's where we can definitely start to look at the data and start to make a difference by making some decisions based on the customers who we retain, right? Who come back. And this is the first step towards looking at that. And again, just as a side note, you're going to see me pointing over here because that's where my other monitor is. And that's where the what on the screen is over here for me. So what I did is I figured out that for this client of mine, their customers broke naturally into 5 groups. We have the one-timers, and so this is literally a customer that visited one time in the whole calendar year, one-timers. If you think about it also as another side note, that's interesting too, isn't it? So, stick a pin in that and let's look at that as we keep going. Then we have the ones who visited monthly, more or less, the ones who I call casual, sporadic. They visited 2 to 3 times in the year. And then we've got the most frequent. Now, these are the ones that were more than once a week, basically. And so now, again, how did I come up with these categories? And why did I come up with 5 categories? Why not 4? Why not 7? I was guided by what the data looked like. I literally went in and I figured out, I generated a frequency table. I looked at the histograms. I looked to see even, you could even look at the stem and leaf plots, that sort of thing. But I looked to see where there were those natural kind of groupings. There are more sophisticated ways that you can come up with customer segments. For this, at this stage of the analysis, we're not worrying about those. We're just doing this to start understanding, start getting a sense for what's going on with our business's data. We can talk about the customer segments and the more sophisticated analyses in another live stream if you're interested. So, the fun thing here is once I had divided up the customers into these 5 groups, then what I did is I figured out how much in sales each of those groups of customers accounted for. And then I plotted it against the day of the week. And so there's a couple of steps in between, a couple of kind of analyses in between the last slide and this one here, but this is more or less where I ended up. What's interesting is look at those one timers. What days of the week do they visit? Absolutely weekends. Saturday and Sunday, especially. Also Friday. And then also this heat map here, it's all in blue, obviously, in various intensities of this color blue. The darker the blue means the more sales. The lighter the blue means less sales. These one timers, look at how much they accounted for sales on Saturdays and Sundays throughout the whole year. This is the whole year. That's really interesting. So, what's driving these one timers? Maybe it's that they are in town for a special event. Might be a conference, might be a play, an art show, a concert, might be family reasons. There might be something going on, some religious holidays or something, but no matter what, they're generating boatloads of sales and you're only capturing them once in the year. How can you capture more of them? How can you make them come back? That would be my next question. Actually, my first question to myself as I'm doing this analysis would be, wait a minute. Seriously? They were only here once in the whole year. So I would be thinking in the back of my head, let me just go double check. Let me run yet more QA on my data set, right? Just to make sure that there's not some bad coding or something like that went on and that's making them look like they only came once in the whole year when in fact they came 3 or 4 times or something. But I've run the QA. It's absolutely correct. They only came once in the year. How do we get more of them? How do we get more of them, right? If they're coming for a concert or a play or something, then that's going to be the sort of information that you're going to be able to use to think about advertising, somehow piggybacking on those events. Because if there are some people who go to those events that patronize your business, there's a good chance there are more. Also, they came once. Is there any way you could convince them to come back again? Now, if they're in town for a conference and literally the conference is here once a year, very unlikely. But if they're in town for a conference, let's say it's a healthcare conference, that conference itself might only be once a year. Maybe there are other healthcare related conferences that these same people might be attending. Is there any way, if they are back in town, but for a slightly different reason, is there any way you could incent them to come back? So, this is where my brain goes when I start to analyze and I start to look at things. There's a lot more I could say, but let's just keep going because I notice we're at about 20 minutes after, and it is a Friday afternoon, right? Y'all get total props for talking data on a Friday afternoon. Not going to make it longer than, than I promised. Okay. So the other that I absolutely loved, and this would blow away any business owner, your average net sales. Again, this is not rocket science. I have done no rocket science here. I have done more or less exploratory data analysis or EDA with a little bit of QA because some things just didn't look right. But here I'm taking an average, that's it. And check out the heat map now. So this heat map actually is not only color blue now. Blue means a positive or more net sales. Sorry, too many heat maps in my head today. The bluer and the darker blue, the more average net sales. The oranger and especially the darker orange, the the lower the net sales. So this is the people who frequent this establishment the most. And remember that most frequent group is at least once a week, physically in the location, they have the lowest average net sale. Doesn't matter the day of the week. In fact, on Thursdays, it's worse. And Sundays and Mondays, it's absolutely worse. But that is a big opportunity loss for this establishment. Think about that. You've got people, customers who like your brand, like your products, like your atmosphere, like the people who are on your staff. They like them enough that they're in there at least once a week. Some of these people, I did take a look at this, were actually in 4 and 5 days a week. And yet, on average, the sales that they account for are low, especially much lower than the people who come in once a year, that group. Even when we look at the casual, or excuse me, the monthly, we're still seeing during the work week, we're seeing that they've got the lowest average sales. Not until we get to the weekends for the monthly. And then to the people who come the least frequently, you're getting higher net sales. So it almost seems like it's backwards, right? You would want the people who are there the most often to be the ones who are generating the most revenue. That's not what's going on here. And so, knowing this, what can you do about it? How are you going to offer incentives? How are you going to maybe roll out a loyalty plan, for example, for especially for that most frequent? Maybe getting some sort of loyalty plan will incent them to come in and buy more, something like that. But these are the sorts of things you wouldn't know unless you had done this kind of analysis. So then this is the way what I did here was for this hypothetical coffee shop, which everyone knows a coffee shop. I went through and I looked to see what the heck they were actually buying the most of. And unsurprisingly, except for the one timers, brewed coffee was the most. But honestly, if we take espresso drink and brewed coffee together, it's the most. So basically, and that's not surprising, is it? No. For a coffee shop, you would expect your coffee, your espresso, your iced mocha lattes to be the items that are the sold the very most. However, especially look at these most frequent. It really does look like all they do is buy coffee and espresso, maybe a tea. They get a flavor shot, right? And that's it. So they're coming in for the coffee. Some of them like the flavors inside in it, and some of them will buy an egg sandwich. Can't blame them. Egg sandwiches are awesome. But for example, they're not buying smoothie bowls. They're not buying any of the others. So, any of the other items on the menu. Again, lost opportunity. How could you incent them? And here, see, this is where it gets very colorful, right? This is not black and white. Here, let's look if we take out coffee, espresso drinks, and tea, what are the top items that are purchased, right? So here, what we're doing is basically we're treating the coffee drinks like an outlier, not really an outlier, but they take up the lion's share. So we want to be able to focus on everything that's not the coffee espresso drinks. Taking those out, what do people buy? Egg sandwich. People love this establishment's egg sandwiches, apparently. Again, who doesn't like a good egg sandwich? But check this out. We got smoothies, we got sandwiches. Now, sandwiches, the one timers are buying sandwiches. Again, it's mostly the people who are coming in the least are the ones buying the sandwiches and buying the smoothie bowls, right? Not necessarily this here. And again, you wouldn't be seeing this if all you had were tables. And all I've done here is, again, I've totaled up number of items purchased, and that's about it. Then, what about if we look at our 5 customer groups that we've got and see not so much which particular items they're buying, but what about if we break the items into categories based on their profit margin? So, in this is a little more complicated than the previous ones because we're taking the items and we're putting them into categories, and we're taking the customers and putting them into categories. So, see, when you start doing layering these different types of thinking onto your analysis, then you can see a lot of different things. This is what, for example, digging in to see what the data is telling me, this is one example of what that looks like. Because here, if I look at this, I see my most frequent, they're buying the lowest profit margin items. That's not good. That, again, is a lost opportunity. You've got people in consistently on a weekly basis, many times, multiple times a week, and they're buying the things that are the lowest profit margin, which in this case is probably the coffees. Because in the previous slide, we saw that brewed coffee and espresso drinks were the things that they bought the most. They're not buying, they're buying the lowest, but then they're also buying this almost the highest. So they are willing to buy those higher profit margin items. That might be a case where we look and see, okay, which are the ones they're buying? I'm going to guess it's egg sandwich probably. Um, but is there something else we could offer that's also a higher profit margin? Because they're showing that they're willing to. If they pair a low profit margin and a high profit margin together, they're showing us that they're willing to buy those. So can we do more of that? Versus down here, we've got the one-timers. They're buying the 4, again, this which is the second highest profit margin. This one here, the lowest, I'm thinking that's probably, again, the coffee or the tea or something. And then the highest. So again, the revenue drivers are right here. Again, right here with the sporadic and the one-timers. These are the revenue drivers. These are not. And so in this example, I wanted to show this because this, no, yep, this is an example of figuring out, whoop, that is not what I wanted to do. This is an example of figuring out what your data is saying. And then knowing just with these insights, and we could keep going. In fact, I did keep going quite a lot for this hypothetical. This is where you start to figure out, oh, if my most frequent customers are not my revenue generators, what could I do? to get them to be that. If those one-time customers are the revenue generators or are more likely to buy those high profit margin items, what could I do to try to get them back in? And we haven't even gotten to the question of retention or anything like that. But hopefully, this gives you a sense of, what I mean when I talk about being able to really see what your data is saying, and also to show you that I did not use any advanced statistics, any advanced analytics. I didn't do any of that with these. I did bar graphs, I did aggregations, I tallied up, I did a sum, I did subtotals. But what I did is I took those and I made pictures, and then I graphed them over time, and then I broke them into different kinds of subgroups, different kinds of categories based on aspects of each that were of interest. So, an aspect of interest for the products is what's their profit margin, right? Because as a business, you want to make revenue. Absolutely. We all want revenue. But in many ways, revenue is a vanity metric because if your costs outpace your revenue, then you're in the red. So, really looking at revenue, but also looking at profit is where, as a business owner, we can really get the most bang for our buck and we can make sure we're building a sustainable, a healthy business. If this is the kind of analysis that you'd like to be able to do for your business, then check out the coaching packages on my website at www.jlaanalytics.com. Got some coaching packages there. I'll show you how to do this sort of thing and more, most of the time with your very own data. This is also the kind of analytics skills that I teach in my certificate in business analytics at the University of New Hampshire. I teach it virtually. And the next cohort is starting next Wednesday, actually, September 13th of 2023. If you're interested in perhaps joining me and the other students in that certificate program, check out the link that I'll put down below. Again, it's over at the University of New Hampshire, their professional development and training group. If you've got any questions, any comments, any feedback, drop those below. I would love to hear what you have to say. Was there something that I said that was confusing? Was there something that just didn't sound right? And I will reply. Also, if there are any topics that you would like to see me address, drop those in the comments too. I'm always happy to talk about the data related topics here that my community members have. And with that, I think I'm going to call it a day for this live stream. It is suddenly outside my window gone from sunny to very dark, and I'm hearing thunder. So that's New England weather for you, people. All right. Until next Friday, go forth and analyze.